Business Live today.
My name is Daryl Carr. Thanks once again for being with us. Now, last weekend's tidal waves in some parts of the central, Volta and western regions have dealt a devastating blow on coastal communities and affected some business activities along the coast. Now, here in Accra, Sheila Tamaklo visited the London beach side along the coast and reports that fishing and some construction activities have been badly affected by the recent climatic conditions.
Over the weekend, I'm sure you've heard stories of how there has been constant erosion, coastal erosion from Keta, Ada, and some other coastal areas. Currently, I'm at Labadi, and as you can see behind me, the tidal waves are quite strong, and they keep coming much more into the seashore lines. As you can see, it's eroding it gradually and coming in. So I'm here, and I'm going to speak to some of the community members as to how this is affecting their livelihood and their businesses, seen as fishing is the major source of livelihood for these community members. So according to him, formerly the sea, as you can see, was way behind. The shoreline was much stretched compared to what you are seeing today. So due to this, each time it rains, it kind of brings rubbish to the seashore like we are seeing currently. And because of the way it has advanced into their sea, onto the shore, they have to also drag their boats way back to avoid it being carried off when the rain comes down.
Ni na gba baba o jinu ni gba wona ye ni gota kan o wana ga fite shpon fe ke na gba ni beni etomi ke ba nu mi eji na gba ke awo ka ji bi antone na akwa ni aba fe aga ghost kuba sana e ba mi so aga ba hin awo. So
according to Mr. Emmanuel here, he also says that the water keeps coming into the seashore and it has eroded the land over the years. However, they also like government to consider coming up with some form of a sea defense to block and help keep their shore safe. It's not just going to help them to stop the water from coming further, but then he believes that it's also going to block the plastics from getting onto the seashores because it's a big disturbance and a nuisance to them as a community. Moving down the Labadi coastal line, it is clear that the issue of the coastal erosion not only affects their livelihood, but then also investments. Like this edifice that we see behind us, it's $1 million high-rise building. But then this project has stalled as it's sitting precariously close to receded coastal lines, and it threatens the very foundations of this building. What then can we do to be able to forestall such situations? Well, over the years, government has invested in some sea defense projects, like the $60 million sea defense project in Sakumono and that of the Keta and Ada areas. But then more needs to be done and more investment has been done in the management of our sea lines. Or else the question will become what remains the fate of such investments and such high-rise buildings along our coastal lines. Reporting for Joy Business, Sheila Tamaklo.
Sheila Tamaklo braving the rains there. Meanwhile, Minister of Works and Housing, Samuel Atachia, has assured that government will collaborate with the recently launched Construction Bank and some other commercial banks to help raise funds for the construction of sea defense walls around coastal communities in the country. About 1,000 residents over the weekend, as we've been saying, were displaced by the tidal waves in some parts of the Volta and central regions. The Works and Housing Minister said government needs financial institutions to finance the sea defense projects in the country.
The challenges for the past 8 years will be able to meet the infrastructure needs of this country. On the contrary, a bank of this nature will be able to help in solving infrastructure problems by having good assurances from the government, and then in tandem the investors will be able to come and wipe out the infrastructure deficit. Because if you look at the huge capital outlay connected to infrastructure, I'm telling you that given the state of our economy currently, there's no way we'll be able to clear the deficit. Roads, electricity, whatever I want to talk about, which has a huge capital outlay. I don't think the government is having enough money to absorb all these expenditures.
Now let's come to the issue of sea defense walls. I mean, we have some projects that are already been undertaken by Amandi Holdings. Is government going to collaborate with Construction Bank to look out for others that are still not, touched, to make sure that they are being...
There are several of them that have not been touched. It's all got into cash flow problems. So therefore, can we say that the government will have a good synergy with this bank and say that, look, we are being threatened by the sea. Let's get some more people to come and do the sea defense, and then they'll be paid. That is where we should go. But in all these things, we should bear in mind that there is an extent that you can't commit the government in terms of the IMF strictures. These are some of the matters which become imperative, that if the bank will give concessionary lending arrangements, then we can do good business.
But when the need arises, won't you go for the IMF to review some of their constraints?
Well, it is something in the pipeline, but I don't want to discuss these matters now. But for sure, the Akufo-Addo government is on the verge of ensuring that anything which will lower the standards of Ghana will be removed, including IMF strictures.
Well, away from that, the Bank of Baroda has again emerged the best place to secure credit according to the latest Bank of Ghana annual percentage rate and average interest. Now, George Jaffe joins me in the studio with more on this report. What is it about the Bank of Baroda? Or maybe I should be asking you how the Bank of Ghana reaches this conclusion.
Well, they do an assessment of around 31 banks in the country. Now, anytime a bank extends credit to you, there's the actual cost that often is not known to the general public that the Bank of Ghana wants to go behind, assess the numbers and look at the actual cost or the actual cost of that lending to you, Darryl. So the base rate is the floor for any negotiations. Some banks would do base plus 10, base plus 6, or base plus 15. And that will be the actual cost that you are going to pay on that loan that you take home from that commercial bank. So the Bank of Ghana did an assessment of 31 banks ending May. And when they did that assessment, it looks like Bank of Baroda was offering more the best rate in terms of the real credit compared to the other banks. They were doing a range of 22% to 28%. So some would say that, what about other banks who are doing 25? Well, it looks like if you have a very good credit, if your credit score is good, if you're a very credit-worthy Darryl and someone like you can walk into Baroda and you might be lending, or they'll be lending to you at 24%, 22%, or even 22%. And if you compare to other banks, they had the best rate, or they were coming across as the best institution to secure credit from.
Well, I'm curious to know which kinds of businesses benefited from this cheap credit.
So for businesses, for those who are operating in the agricultural sector, those who are operating in commerce, those who are operating in other areas like manufacturing as well, they had the opportunity to secure credit by paying an interest of 22% to about 28%. So if somebody's working in the manufacturing sector and they turn to that bank, this is how the bank was charging them. If you were in the agricultural sector and they turned to that bank, and in May, this is the range of interest that they were paying, or called it the actual cost that they were paying to the bank in terms of the credit that was extended to them.
And what about the deposits?
Well, deposits, if you also track the banks or do an assessment, Omnibank was offering 18.3%. And some might also say that it's a strategy to attract more deposits, because if you have very limited funds available as a bank, you have to offer more than what the industry is offering so that people can bring their funds there. And don't forget, it is always argued that it's more of a financial intermediation. So if there's someone here, I borrow from you, I also lend to that person. When the person pays back, I also... So it's a cycle. So it looks like the best rate being offered, you could attract those big institutions to place funds with you, and then you also on lend. It means that at 18.3%, he has to also charge a little bit more in terms of lending it to you so that he can make some good profits on it and again pay back that institutional investor. And that is what Omnibank was, or came up tops in terms of the 31 banks that we assessed, or Bank of Ghana assessed, offering the best interest on deposits.
Okay, so just for those watching who are wondering what's the morale behind this publication, what's it supposed to achieve?
There's always been an argument about the Bank of Ghana's policy rate and whether indeed the banks are responding and whether indeed rates are going down. And this whole thing that came about is even this formula for calculating lending rates and all those things. Don't forget, a little education to our viewers. There's a difference between the base rate and the lending rate. So the base rate is what every commercial bank would announce or place an advert in the papers that, okay, let's say Darrell Bank is offering maybe 30% as interest on a loan. Now, if you should walk into that bank and say, okay, Darrell, lend it to me. Well, Darrell will tell you that, okay, I'm going to factor your risk. I'm going to factor insurance cost. I'm going to factor the fact that, you know, you operate in a sector that is risky. So I'm going to add all those costs in interest terms on that particular loan. And therefore, even though you advertise 30%, I'll end up in about 40% on that loan. And that is what this whole thing is about. So why doesn't the Bank of Ghana find an avenue where they could bring these things out? So you and I are well educated and indirectly could also force other banks to also reduce their rates so that they can get this publication, free adverts on Joy FM and a multi-TV that's the best place to secure credit from.
Thanks very much, George, for that update. There's some more information we are gleaning from the Bank of Ghana report from of the banking sector. Now, we're hearing that private firms account for a larger chunk of the loans that banks fear might not be paid on time. That's according to the latest report. And once again, George Yafe breaks all of that down for us.
Bank of Ghana report puts the total non-performing loans as at April this year at around 7.15 billion Ghana cedis, representing a 24.5% increase from the 5.74 billion Ghana cedis in April 2016. According to the report, the private sector share of the 7.15 billion Ghana cedis stock of non-performing loans was 97%, representing an increase of about 11%. Most of these loans that have not been paid back on time was held by firms operating in commerce and finance sector. It was believed that government was the biggest cause of this problem, which has led to the high interest rates being charged by commercial banks. But the Bank of Ghana report shows that it was rather the private sector. The inability of these firms to pay back the loans on time has actually resulted in some high interest rates, which the bank have argued that they had to share the cost with potential borrowers. However, some of the private firms have also argued that their inability to pay these debts is due to government indebtedness to them, as a lot of them have also rendered services to the state the government has delayed in paying them.
We'll still remain in the banking space because Barclays Africa says it's still interested in establishing an offshore banking facility in Ghana. This was after the then Kufuor administration moved to establish an international financial services center in Ghana. Barclays was forced to shut the facility after the NDC administration moved to close the center over fears that the country could become a haven for money laundering. Chief Executive for Barclays in charge of other regions in Africa, Peter Malari, tells Joy Business the bank now wants to focus on finalizing the sell down by Barclays UK before looking at this option.
So my short response to that is it's certainly one of the strategies we're evaluating and looking at right now. And I'm sure over the next short to medium term, you'll see us executing against one or two new things. We haven't firmed up on that yet, but certainly we recognize it as an important issue. It's been raised by the Ghanaian Central Bank with us in the past, and we've committed to continue to look at that. I think we do need to get through this transition, though, first. You know, with PLC exiting, PLC exiting, settling down, the shareholders, etc., etc. But quite clearly, whether in Ghana or in other markets, it's a very important consideration for us that we keep at the forefront of what we do. It's not in the background.
In other news tonight, Ghana loses billions of cedis annually due to the neglect of its indigenous leather industry. That's according to a researcher at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Kumasi. Dr. John Oseibobi, who is also the head of the leather department, argues the industry has got great potential which government can explore as a solution to Ghana's unemployment crisis. Love FM's Kwesi Deborah has been exploring the once vibrant industry and how it can propel Ghana's industrialization drive.
The World Bank's latest report on jobs in Ghana reveals about 48% of the country's youth of between 15 and 24 years are jobless. The population in the age bracket will certainly be higher in the next decade, amid concerns about the country's capacity to contain the pressure for jobs. Amidst such conditions are concerns about Ghana's collapsed leather industry. Situated on a 6.37-acre land, the leather and tannery factory of Fumesia is totally abandoned and now up for sale. Is the government going to buy it for the one district, one factory agenda, or is going to allow a private person to take over? Head of Leather Work Department at Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology is passionate about the issue. Dr. John Osebobie says it is economically unsound to have allowed an industry with such great potential to address unemployment to die. He blames excessive government for the development.
There was a time we interacted with the owners, and their complaint was that the farmers are not taking good care of the animals. How do we blame the farmers? And how do we blame the owner of the factory? Because the government has not paid attention to it. Now you look at Kenya. The government pays serious attention to leather as another major source of income for the country. But in Ghana, I've never heard at any point or anybody or government authority talking about the benefit that we can derive from leather.
Now, the capital market is expected to return with an upward run after last week's setback. Some analysts say the cedi may remain stable against other major trading currencies, while the commodity market is expected to record mixed results, with cocoa likely to continue shedding some value. Investment expert and stock market analyst Aseya Kotia has been assessing the performance of the market as well as the outlook.
After block trades, usually have the market cooling off. It's a natural phenomenon with the market. The market cools off a bit before you have a lot more activity coming up. So it's not that entirely strange. It was very expected, and so we saw that as I said earlier last week. This week, after cooling off, there's a new trading week. Investors are back. Major investors who saw the block trade and tried to get reasoning behind the block trades have made decisions as to what to invest in and what not to invest in, and hence the activity for this week. Cow Bank Limited ended last week very strongly and started this week also on a very positive note. Standard Chartered Bank also was telling last week, and this week also we're expecting nothing different from that. In terms of the losers, last week we had the likes of Bob and the Ghana Commercial Bank shedding off some value. They still have excess supply on the market even as we speak. So we expect this week also to be relatively stable for such stocks, and most likely they'll dip again this week. Still in the quarter in which we issued a $2.25 billion bond. And also last week we had about $700 million coming in with a lot of participation from non-resident investors. And so we still do have a good amount of dollars in the system, hence the relative stability of the cedi. However, against the pound and the euro, the cedi has gained some ground, especially against the pound. So against the pound and the euro, the cedi seems to gain some value.
All right, so now let's take a look at what you're likely to spend on some food commodities. It's the start of the week, and I know that you're already planning towards the weekend. Now, food prices remain relatively stable. This week, the minimum daily amount the average Ghanaian is likely to spend on food is 40 cedis. That's arguable, which is 1 cedi incremental difference from last week. Let's now have a look at some prices of food items. Hopefully those figures should help you plan this week. This is Business Live. We are taking a short break. We'll be back.
Business Live today.
Welcome back to the program. I want to do some more analysis of the stock market. I'm joined in the studio by Betha Tubiga, and nice to see you. We're hearing that Standard Chartered Bank releases financials today. What do we have?
Well, they had their AGM last week, and that was when it was released. Before it had come out, but they deliberated more on the figures. And surprisingly, the company did extremely well for 2016. The profit before tax went up by more than 200%. And the dividends per share also increased from about 37 pesos to 1 CD 12 pesos per share. And that is the highest paying dividend so far on the market. We're looking at for the financial year 2016. So Standard Chartered Bank, we're expecting it to actually attract more investors on the stock market. We're expecting some gains. It's actually one of the equities that we're expecting it to add up to investors' capital this week on the exchange. And if you look at the earnings per share actually gives investors the outlook, the future prospects of the company, what they should expect. Earnings per share also went up by 256% from 54 pesos to 1 CD 92 pesos, 1 CD 92 pesos, and that's also a very significant shift for Standard Chartered Bank. It's a very good performance, and investors should look out for more, considering the fact that the dividend payout went down continuously for some time, and it has gone up by that margin. It's very impressive.
Let's look at Cal Bank's performance. You've got information for us on that one.
Cal Bank too, let me say, for some time, some past weeks, Cal Bank was shedding off value on the stock market, and within a period of 2 weeks, it lost about 48 pesos, right? It lost about 80 pesos in 2 weeks. From 72 pesos to 48 pesos. But last week, we saw the equity close at 80 pesos per share. And that's from the beginning of the year till now, you can see it has gone up by 6.67%. And that was also a kind of a drastic shift for Cal, though 80 pesos now is very good, considering the fact that it lost about from 72 to 48 pesos in 2 weeks, and picking up is very, very impressive. And it's also one of the equities that we're expecting it to actually add up to investors' capital this week.
Let's do a quick one on the city, because you've been tracking the performance for half year. Where are we at right now?
Well, if you look at the CD as at close of Friday from the beginning of the year, the CD has lost about 5.20%. It has lost 5.20% to major trading partners on the interbank market. That's the dollar, pound, and euro. And this is based on the Gold Coast CD index that measures the holistic year-to-date performance of the CD on the interbank market.
Thanks very much,
You're
Betha
welcome.
Tubiga there. Thanks so much. We want to move on now to our interview of the day. Now, some banks are asking for a little bit of time to reduce their lending rates to in line with current developments. Now, some commercial banks are yet to reduce their cost of credit, despite a significant reduction in key variables that influence cost of credit, including the policy rate. Ishmael Yamson is board chair of Standard Chartered Bank.
Interview of the day.
The difference between a bank's lending rate and a bank's base rate. The base rate is prescribed by the central bank, base plus whatever. So it is the plus that we should talk about. Why do you add 8% on your base rate, or 6% or 4%? It also depends on the efficiency of the banks. Some banks are so efficient that the plus will be 5, the plus will be 6. Some banks are so inefficient that even if they add 10, they will still make a loss. So then it goes from one bank to another. But what I'm trying to say is that the base rate of banks moves almost automatically with the decline in the policy rate, because it is prescribed by the central bank.
And it's more of just a matter of time that these the chips will fall at the right place.
I am absolutely sure that if the fiscal performance continues to improve, there's no reason why that interest rates won't come down. Remember in 2010, when we had single-digit inflation, We in Standard Chartered Bank were lending out at 15%. So it depends very much on because you don't say that today the central bank has come down, therefore reduce your interest rate. Why you don't know that 3 months from now the same central bank is going to go up? So you need to read consistency of performance into the fiscal management and in the monetary environment. Then you are confident enough to adjust. So this is not something you just put it on and bring back and put it on and put like you are putting off lights and switching off lights. You need, because it has implications for everything.
Interview of the day.
And that's our show tonight. Thanks for watching. My name is Darryl Kwa. We are back same time tomorrow.